Medieval castles were not just simple stone buildings scattered across the landscape. They were the very centers of power, protection, and daily life during the Middle Ages. These impressive structures, built mostly between the 9th and 15th centuries, served multiple important purposes. They were homes for kings, nobles, and knights, but also acted as military fortresses designed to defend against enemy attacks, and as administrative centers where lords governed their lands. The design of a castle was carefully planned to provide maximum security and functionality. Thick stone walls, often several feet thick, surrounded the castle to keep invaders out. Many castles were built on hilltops or near rivers to take advantage of natural defenses. Moats, deep, wide ditches filled with water, were common features that made it difficult for enemies to approach the walls. Drawbridges could be raised or lowered to control access, and arrow slits, narrow vertical openings in the walls, allowed archers to shoot at attackers while remaining protected. But castles were more than just military structures. They were also centers of administration and social life. The lord of the castle was the ruler of the surrounding lands and held court in the Great Hall, where important decisions were made, disputes were settled, and guests were entertained. The Great Hall was the heart of the castle, a large room where people gathered for meals, celebrations, and meetings. It was often decorated with banners, tapestries, and a large fireplace to provide warmth. Inside the castle walls, life was busy and complex. Knights and soldiers lived there to defend the castle, while servants, cooks, blacksmiths, and other craftsmen worked tirelessly to keep everything running smoothly. Castles were often self-sufficient, with their own wells for water, kitchens for food preparation, and workshops for making weapons, armor, and tools. Living in a castle was not always comfortable. The thick stone walls kept the cold out, but heating was limited to large fireplaces, and rooms could be dark and damp. Winters were especially harsh, and the castle's inhabitants had to endure long, cold months with limited light and warmth. Despite these challenges, castles were symbols of power and prestige. They represented the wealth and authority of their owners, and were often built in strategic locations such as hilltops or near important trade routes. The sight of a towering castle could inspire awe and fear in both friends and enemies. Understanding what life was really like inside a medieval castle helps us appreciate the complexity of medieval society. It was a world of strict hierarchy, hard work, and constant vigilance. The castle was not just a home, but a fortress, a workplace, and a social hub all at once. In the following sections, we will explore the different parts of the castle, from the Great Hall to the kitchens, living quarters, and even the dungeons. We will learn about the people who lived there and how they managed their daily lives in this unique and fascinating environment. The Great Hall was the heart and soul of the medieval castle, serving as the main gathering place for social, political, and ceremonial activities. It was a large, impressive room, often with high wooden beams supporting the roof and walls adorned with colorful banners and rich tapestries. The Great Hall was where the lord of the castle held court, met with his advisors, and entertained guests from near and far. During feasts and celebrations, the Great Hall would come alive with music, laughter, and the clinking of goblets. Long wooden tables were laden with platters of roasted meats, fresh bread, fruits, and barrels of ale. The aroma of the food filled the air, enticing everyone present. Servants moved swiftly through the hall, carrying trays of food and drink, ensuring that guests were well fed and comfortable. The atmosphere was lively and full of energy, with minstrels playing lutes and jesters performing tricks to entertain the crowd. The Great Hall was not only a place for feasting, but also a center for important meetings and decision-making. The lord and his council would gather to discuss matters of the realm, settle disputes, and plan for defense or hunting expeditions. Villagers and knights sometimes came to the hall to present their cases or seek justice from the lord. This made the Great Hall a hub of political and social life, where power and community intersected. Besides the lord and his family, knights, nobles, and important guests spent much of their time in the Great Hall. Common servants and workers rarely entered except to serve or clean. The hall was a symbol of power and prestige, reflecting the status of the lord and his household. It was designed to impress visitors and demonstrate the wealth and influence of its owner. Lighting in the Great Hall came from large fireplaces and numerous candles, creating a warm but dim atmosphere. During the cold winter months, the Great Hall was one of the warmest places in the castle, offering relief from the chill of the stone walls. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, adding to the hall's majestic yet cozy ambiance. Music and entertainment were common in the Great Hall. Minstrels played instruments like the lute and harp, while jesters performed acrobatics and told jokes to amuse the guests. These performances were an essential part of castle life, providing relief from the hardships of medieval living. Despite its grandeur, the Great Hall was a busy and noisy place, full of life and activity. It was where the social fabric of the castle was woven, balancing power, politics, and community. Understanding the role of the Great Hall helps us appreciate how medieval society functioned and how people from different classes interacted within the castle walls. In the next section, we will explore the castle kitchen and the food that fueled this vibrant life, revealing the hard work and skill behind every meal served to everyone in the castle. The castle kitchen was the bustling heart of medieval culinary life, responsible for preparing meals for everyone living within the castle walls. Unlike modern kitchens, medieval castle kitchens were large, noisy, and filled with the smells of roasting meat, fresh bread, and herbs. They were often located in a separate building or a lower part of the castle to reduce the risk of fire spreading to the main living areas. Inside the kitchen, cooks and kitchen staff worked tirelessly from early morning until late at night. Their tasks included roasting large joints of meat over open fires, baking bread in stone ovens, and preparing stews and soups in huge cauldrons. The kitchen was a busy place, with assistants fetching water, chopping vegetables, and grinding spices. Food was a symbol of wealth and status in medieval times. The lord and his family enjoyed a variety of dishes, including roasted meats like venison, beef, and pork, as well as fish, especially during religious fasting days. Spices such as pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were highly prized and used to flavor dishes, showing the wealth of the household. Meals were often served in the Great Hall, where guests and residents gathered to eat and socialize. The kitchen staff had to prepare large quantities of food to feed dozens, sometimes hundreds of people during feasts and celebrations. This required careful planning and coordination. Despite the abundance of food for the nobility, the kitchen staff themselves often ate simpler meals, usually leftovers or basic fare like pottage, a thick vegetable stew. Their work was physically demanding and required great skill to manage the fires, timing, and preparation of multiple dishes simultaneously. The kitchen was also responsible for preserving food. Techniques like salting, smoking, and drying were used to keep meat and fish edible for longer periods, especially during winter months when fresh food was scarce. Understanding the workings of a medieval castle kitchen gives us insight into the daily lives of both the privileged and the servants. It highlights the complexity and organization required to sustain life in a large medieval household. In the next section, we will explore the living quarters and chambers where the lord, his family, and knights rested after their busy days. The living quarters inside a medieval castle were designed to provide shelter, comfort, and security for the lord, his family, and the knights who served him. These rooms varied greatly in size and luxury, depending on the occupant's status. The lord's private chambers were often the most lavish, decorated with rich fabrics, colorful tapestries, and fine wooden furniture. These rooms were a symbol of wealth and power, showcasing the lord's status to visitors. The chambers were usually heated by large fireplaces, essential for surviving the cold winters. Thick stone walls kept the rooms insulated, but the lack of modern heating meant that warmth was limited to the areas near the fire. Windows were small and often covered with wooden shutters or oiled cloth to keep out the cold and rain, which made the rooms dimly lit. Knights and soldiers typically had simpler living quarters, often shared with others. Their rooms were functional, furnished with basic wooden beds, chests for storing belongings, and racks for their armor and weapons. Privacy was limited, and many rooms served multiple purposes, such as sleeping, working, and storage. Servants and lower-ranking staff usually slept in communal dormitories or small, modest chambers. These rooms were sparsely furnished and offered little comfort. Despite this, the servants played a crucial role in the daily functioning of the castle, and their quarters were often located close to the areas where they worked. The castle's living spaces were designed with security in mind. Heavy wooden doors with iron locks protected the chambers, and some castles had private chapels or oratories within the living quarters for prayer and reflection. The layout of the rooms often reflected the social hierarchy, with the lord's family occupying the most secure and comfortable areas. Despite the stone walls and cold air, the inhabitants made efforts to create a warm and welcoming environment. Rooms were decorated with colorful rugs, cushions, and tapestries that helped insulate against the cold. Wooden floors were often covered with rushes or animal skins to provide additional warmth and comfort. Furniture was mostly made of wood and included beds, benches, chests, and tables. The craftsmanship varied, with the lord's chambers featuring finely carved pieces, while the servants' quarters had simple utilitarian furniture. Life in the living quarters was a balance of comfort and practicality, reflecting the needs and status of the inhabitants. Understanding these spaces gives us insight into the daily lives of medieval nobility and warriors, revealing how they lived, worked, and rested within the castle walls. In the next section, we will explore the castle's defense mechanisms and the role of dungeons in medieval life. Medieval castles were built primarily for defense, designed to withstand sieges and attacks from enemies. The architecture of these castles was carefully planned to create multiple layers of protection. Thick stone walls, often several feet thick, formed the first line of defense. These walls were high and topped with battlements, parapets with gaps called crenellations, that allowed defenders to shoot arrows or pour boiling oil on attackers while staying protected. Castles were often surrounded by moats, deep ditches filled with water, which made it difficult for enemies to approach the walls directly. Drawbridges spanned these moats and could be raised or lowered to control access. The entrance to the castle was usually heavily fortified with strong wooden gates reinforced with iron. Towers were strategically placed along the walls to provide vantage points for lookouts and archers. These towers allowed defenders to see approaching enemies from a distance and gave them a height advantage during battle. Some castles had round towers, which were more resistant to battering rams and provided better angles for defense. Inside the castle, narrow passageways and gatehouses created choke points where attackers could be trapped and easily targeted. Murder holes, openings, and ceilings above gateways allowed defenders to drop stones, boiling water, or hot sand on enemies below. Dungeons were dark, damp, and often underground chambers used to imprison captives, criminals, or political enemies. These cells were usually small, with little light or ventilation, making them harsh and uncomfortable places to be held. Some dungeons were equipped with chains or manacles to restrain prisoners. The castle's defense was not only physical, but also psychological. The imposing walls, towering battlements, and the sight of armed knights standing guard sent a clear message of strength and deterrence to potential attackers. Despite these defenses, castles could still fall if besieged for long periods or if attackers found weaknesses. Siege engines like trebuchets, battering rams, and siege towers were used to break down walls or gates. Defenders had to be resourceful and resilient to survive such attacks. Understanding the defense mechanisms and the role of dungeons helps us appreciate the challenges of medieval warfare and the harsh realities of castle life. These features were essential for protecting the inhabitants and maintaining control over the surrounding lands. In the next section, we will explore the social life and festivals inside the castle, revealing the vibrant culture that thrived within these fortified walls. Life inside a medieval castle was not only about defense and daily chores, it was also filled with social gatherings, festivals, and celebrations that brought the community together. These events were important for strengthening bonds among the lord, his family, knights and servants, and for displaying wealth and power. Festivals were often tied to religious holidays, seasonal changes, or significant events such as weddings, births, or victories in battle. The castle courtyard and great hall would be decorated with colorful banners, flowers, and tapestries to create a festive atmosphere. Music, dancing, and feasting were central to these celebrations. Minstrels and musicians played instruments like lutes, harps, and drums, filling the air with lively tunes. Jesters and performers entertained the crowd with jokes, acrobatics, and magic tricks. These entertainers were highly valued for their ability to lift spirits and provide amusement.